Faces dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Tuesday. It is your Tuesday tune-up. That hashtag will catch on one of these days, probably something, maybe, sort of, probably not. That's the show where we get you kind of set for what you might have missed. And if you missed soccer over there last night, it was ridiculous, more so than usual. But that's what happens occasionally, especially when it's a late start. If you missed some trivia last night with Soccer in the Streets, you need to put that down on your calendar in January when we're back in 2021. Fun contest, came down to the final question again, like it always does. Thanks to Kevin Egan for jumping in with a couple of rounds of trivia. It stumped me on a couple of questions. Thanks to Andy Bunker from 92.9 The Game jumping in with a round of trivia on the U.S. Women's National Team. He got me on a question that I didn't expect. Mia Hamm, the all-time leader in U.S. Women's National Team assists. Did not know that one. But their help, we ended up raising about $600 for Soccer in the Streets, just playing some trivia. That's pretty sweet. And we can't do that without you guys. So we need y'all to sign up next time when we do it. It's going to be mid-January once we get kind of past the new year and kind of into the year a little bit. We'll have another edition. Thanks for spreading the word on that. We had more people than ever before this time around, and it's only going to continue to grow. We're starting to get some quizmasters who are like, "Hey, I want to get in on this. I want to play." So hopefully we have some new faces next month, and we keep growing it. So last night was a busy one. Yesterday was a busy one in the MLS front, and a lot of news, rumor, innuendo. We'll try to make sense of all that. We'll try to make sense of the timeline as well for this week because it really kicks off today at 6 o'clock. That's the MLS expansion draft at 6 Eastern. Austin FC can pick up 5 players there. We'll go through the lists here in a bit. John, just kind of like where are you like as we start to get really into, now we've had a trade window, a few players have moved. You know, are there teams you're looking at that you expect to be active over the next week, whether it's free agents, you know, outside of Austin, obviously, because they have to pick up 5 players, at least their names. But you looking for teams to be active in free agency, the waiver draft, the reentry draft? Are you looking for any certain teams that need to be busy?
Well, I'm looking at DC. I'm looking at the LA Galaxy. And I guess from the Galaxy standpoint, just because of the fact that they have 13 players currently that are under contract.
Do I believe? Let's get that number, and we'll talk about the LA Galaxy. 13 players, 1 goalkeeper, 1 left back, 3 center backs, 1 right back, 4 central midfielders, a left winger who's barely played, and 2 forwards. You've got Chicharito, you've got Efrain Alvarez, you've got Sebastian Lletget, you've got Jonathan Dos Santos. Those are all solid pieces. You've got, I think, a couple of center backs that you can roll with out of Nick Dupuy, Giancarlo Gonzalez, Daniel Steres. You've got Julian Araujo. Danilo Acosta, I like as a left back. We'll see if he can make the jump. So your back line is meh. It needs to upgrade potentially. Probably at center back is where I'm leaning.
Yep.
You've got a lot of issues. You need to replace Christian Pavon's production or bring him back, and you got to negotiate that. The Galaxy have a lot to do. I mean, just even beyond like, okay, they need a center back to make their defense better. They need bodies too.
Yeah,
they've got 13 of them.
First and foremost for me, it's looked like that. Okay, the LA Galaxy need bodies.
Sadly, yes.
And when you're a team that finished and had a season like the LA Galaxy did, the fact that you need bodies to start off with when you only have 13 under contract, you better have a plan because you got to get folks in and you got to make sure that whatever you want 2021 to look like, you've got a certain kind of guy in mind. You've got a certain position in mind. You've got to lay it all out there so you don't have a redo of 2020. But the fact that you only have 13 players currently under contract means you've got a lot of work to do.
It's a bit of a problem because your game day roster is usually 18.
Yes.
You're technically ineligible if you have 13 players. So they've got some work to do. You mentioned DC United as well. Let's take a look at the DC master roster. 18 players. You've got one goalkeeper under contract in Bill Hamid, so you're going to need reserves there. That can be accomplished. Yes. Left back, Joseph Mora, good. Center backs, you've got 3 good ones. I think you're going to have to start making a little bit of a decision on, is Frederick Briant going to phase out and Donovan Pines becomes an absolute regular? He should, in my opinion. Pines is one of the most underrated players in Major League Soccer. Birnbaum and Briant are your other 2 center backs. They've been there for quite a while. You don't have a right back. You didn't have a right back last year. You played Julian Gressel at right back occasionally. You played Russell Canals at right back occasionally. It was a mishmash, and you probably should go get a right back, maybe 2. Central midfielders, you've got Canals, solid. You've got Edison Flores, good. Junior Moreno, good. Moses Nyman, really promising young up-and-coming player who needs to play. We saw Yamil Assad play centrally as the year went on, and actually was pretty solid as an 8. I was pleasantly surprised. We saw Julian Gressel play as an 8 or a 10. It didn't really work as well. On the wings, you've got Assad, you've got Gressel, you've also got Kevin Paredes and Griffin Yao, 2 really promising young players who are going to need minutes somewhere. Oh yeah, Paul Arriola's back as well. Up top, Ola Kamara, Jordi Reyna, Eric Sorga. It's not bad. Like, that front part isn't too bad. You've got to figure out how to make it fit. Is it Kamara up top? It's Gressel and Areola. I mean, what are you going to do? And Assad. And Yao and Paredes. Like, the way you're set, you're not going to play the kids. The kids need to play. I don't know. Central mid, you need to play Nyman with one of the other ones. And you've got a lot of extra bodies here. So if you're DC, first you got to hire a coach.
Yes.
Second, I think you need to make some moves. Because not just to pick people up, but you've got trade bait. And this is where you want to be in some ways if you're DC United. I'll tell you why. You've got solid veteran, Russell Canals. Edison Flores, really good. You picked him up. I think that was a good signing. Hasn't necessarily come really good yet. Junior Moreno's been a solid player in this league. And then you've got Nyman coming through. You need to start playing Nyman. Or you need to make the decision to sell him young. I don't think that's the case yet. So, Junior Moreno, for example. Trade him. Find somewhere for him to go. Get assets back. Maybe get a player you want. Maybe you got to give up Canals. Okay. Make that decision because you need to make room for Nyman. On the wings, you've added Yamil Assad. You added him, then he went away, then you added him back. Julian Gressel you added, you paid a lot for him. Paul Arriola is one of your stars. You've got those 3, but you've also got Griffin, Yao, and Paredes coming through. Can you rotate the minutes to get everybody happy? That might be tough. You're not going to trade or sell Paul Arriola. I don't think you're going to trade or sell Julian Gressel, not after how much you paid for him. Does that mean Yamil Assad could be available for the right price? Okay. That's what you have to think about because you have Kevin Paredes coming through. You probably need to figure out what system you're going to play too, because are you going to play a system that would allow you to play Gressel as a wing back maybe and play Arriola in a slightly different role? He can play centrally. He could play up top as a second forward. He's a pretty versatile player. And then up top, you added Jordi Reyna. You have Ola Kamara. You've got Sorga, who was somewhat productive last season, a little bit of a surprise. Do you need all 3? Did you add Reyna to move Ola Kamara? Like, you've got all these different conundrums in your front 6, and your back 4 is not quite good enough yet. So either use it to add allocation money, which we can argue, as Thomas Jewin tried to make it even more complicated on Twitter yesterday. I said I was trying to make the allocation money be cap space in terms of an explanation, and he went full lawyer on us with,
yes, he did.
Well, it's X, Y, and Z, and this and that. And I'm like, that's not easier. That's even more complicated. What are we doing? Thomas, I'm totally with you. You're 100% correct in the way you explain it. I'm just trying to figure out a way to simplify it because I think at times we get allocation money maybe misunderstood. Y'all know where we're going with this. You want to add allocation money so you can add more players or buy your cap down, one way or another. You've got 3 center backs that you can roll with. And probably need to shift who the reserve is and who the starters are. That's cool. You've got a left back that's good. You need a starting right back. So you've got assets in your front 6. You need to go get a right back. That should be priority one for DC. And you've got the assets to go get a good right back in this league, or get assets to be able to go bring in a good right back from outside the league. You need some more depth, and you can do that, or you might have some kids coming through. But with Yao, with Paredes, with Nyman, with Pines, that's 4 very good young players that have come through DC's academy that you can't block. You can't let them stagnate. If you decide that this year, depending on who you go hire, all right, if we make a move here or there, we can compete in the Eastern Conference. I don't think they're there. I do not see that unless they make some really big, surprising moves. I mean, Mesut Ozil, it's come up before. I don't know. I don't even know if that's enough. But let's say they have this feeling internally that we can win the East. Okay, then find a loan for Yao, for Paredes, for Nyman. Get them playing time somewhere, and not with Loudoun United. There comes a time for me where guys get past playing for the second team. It's like you come through the academy, you start to play for the second team as an academy player, then you become a regular for the second team. At some point, you max out, and you either need to join the first team, and it can be in a reserve role as long as there's a good number of minutes there, or it needs to be you're playing elsewhere, and it could be a loan to another second division team, it could be a loan to another first division team, and we haven't seen much of that in MLS. Very rarely we've seen the intra-league loans for young players. Or you need to find somebody to loan them to. And look, I mean, MLS has never really exploited loaning players to South America. I don't know why. I think, if we're going to buy players from South America that you think are being developed properly, create a relationship. If you have a young player who's maxed out from your second team, loan them to a Vélez, loan them to a Bonfield, loan them to a middle tier kind of Argentine club. Loan them to Ecuador to go in and play if they're going to go in and play. Loan them somewhere that's different than Scandinavia or the standards. You got to loan them somewhere they're going to play and test them a little bit. If you like how players are being developed in South America, loan them there. There's nothing wrong with that. But DC's got some big decisions to make because they've got talent, but they've got a lot of redundancy in their build. I don't think they've built their club very well from their front six. You've got too many similar pieces, and now you've got talent coming through that complicates it because you cannot find the minutes for Canals, Flores, Moreno, Nyman, Paredes, Assad, Yao, Gressel, Areola, Kamara, Reyna, Sorga. There's not enough.
It's a lot of folks.
That's a lot in your front six. I mean, that's your midfield and your forwards. Whatever system you're going to play, it's your midfields and your forwards. It's everybody but your back line. You can't keep all of them happy, and you can't develop your kids. So you've got to figure out a way. It's going to be very, very interesting. While Chara asks the question, shouldn't we do the same for Conway, Campbell, Wolf, etc.? Now, 2020 was a weird year. I think, first off, you have to have the understanding that 2020 was completely different than anybody expected. You didn't have the opportunities for loans as much as you would like. You didn't have the opportunities for players to go back and forth. It's kind of a screwed up year in terms of development. Let's take each of those real quick. So Conway has played a second half of the year, as an academy player playing for Atlanta United 2 in 2018, and he kept getting minutes. He signed a pro deal for Atlanta United 2 and played in 2019 and 20. Now, he had some injuries that maybe took that to, instead of 2 full seasons, 1.5, I think, to be fair. So he's got that under his belt. Now, the question for you with Conway is, you've got Joseph Martinez. He's going to start every game he's healthy. No question. He's going to play as many minutes as he can possibly play. All right. You've got Adam John. You've got Eric Lopez, and I want to see where they see Eric Lopez. Is he a forward? Is he a winger? We have to see. If Conway's not going to factor in to being in game day rosters, to coming off the bench in MLS matches, then you've got to make a decision. And you might need 6 months to figure that out. And that's the good thing about the way the calendars are structured, right? So let's say you're not sure where he fits and how much time he'll see. You got a new manager coming in. You want the new manager to be able to assess him. So Conway sticks with the first team for the first half of the year. he plays a little bit. He might get loaned to Atlanta United too for games here and there to stay fresh. But he stays in the family, right? Then you make a decision going into the second half of the year and also the beginning of leagues overseas. You've got a relationship with Aberdeen. Do you decide, well, he's not getting regular time here. He's not benefiting outside of just staying fresh with Atlanta United 2. They could use him and he could play minutes. Let's send him on loan for 6 months and then bring him back or assess where the loan is at the 6-month period. It's essentially what you did with John Gallagher. Campbell is I think a little more in the boat that he needs to play this season, and I think for defenders it's a little more difficult. You're not going to see as much time in that regard. I think Campbell really needs to play. Is that with Atlanta United too? Because he's only got one full season with the Twos. Or do you do kind of a similar thing where it's 6 months and you assess? I'm leaning because of the new manager. You do the 6-month deal. If that means he plays a lot for the Twos, that's okay. But if you get to June, July, he's not playing first-team minutes, he needs a new challenge, you get him a new challenge. Wolf is a little different because Wolf only played one time with Atlanta United too. He's still very young. Like Morales is in this boat too. Two guys who are on homegrown deals who are young in terms of pro experience. They would be fine to be loaned to Atlanta United too for even the whole season because they just don't have much USL experience. You have to assess it player by player and also what the first team needs. And as much as you can, you want to keep guys in the family, but there comes a time where they need a new challenge because they've stagnated in terms of development, and you can't have that. You've got to continue getting them minutes in places. That was, I think, a good portion of the idea with Andrew Carlton going to Indy. He hadn't broken into the first team. He had played a lot for Atlanta United too, and very, very well at the end of 2019. He wasn't going to get better by playing for Atlanta United too in 2020. He was potentially going to get better by going elsewhere and having a new challenge. And I think he did. I just don't think he did enough to get into the first team here. And that's okay too. He needs to go play somewhere. So it's finding that balance. For DC, they've got to find this with Nyman, Paredes, Yao, and Pines, I think, where they can't let them stagnate. Those are 4 very talented young players that should be the core of your group going forward for 3-4 years. You got to make sure you're doing the right things developmental-wise.
I have 2 other clubs that I would like to bring to the floor for various reasons in the East.
Okay.
Cincinnati and Miami.
Let's go Cincinnati first. So Cincinnati, run through it real quick. You don't have a left back, so you've got to go get a starting left back. Are you satisfied with your goalkeeper situation? Teton seems to be back and forth. Spencer Ritchie's gone. Are you going to commit to Teton this year, or are you still not sure? You've got 2 other guys who are pretty untested at the MLS level, and Beckham Sunderland and Ben Lunt. Center backs, you've got 3, Hagland, Pedersen, Vanderwerf. I'm okay with those 3. I don't know if you've really settled. You kind of divided the minutes up. Pedersen might be the best of the 3. Hagland, you paid a good penny for, so I don't think you're going to want to end that experiment too quick. It looks like all these guys are under contract through just 2021 as well. I don't know option situations. Right back, I think you need a starting right back because Saad Abdul Salam, Zico Bailey, I don't know if they're starters. Okay, so you need 2 starters on the back line. Central midfield, you got a stud in Frankie Amaya. You've got, I think, a really good fit for the way you want to play in Harris Medunjanin. Okay? You've got Alan Cruz. You've got Mokocho, who came in halfway through, who's very good. I think your central midfield, you've got good pieces. You're fine. On the wings, you've got Alvaro Barriel, who came over from Velez and didn't do very well this year. You've got Joe Zhao. You've got Yuya Kubo. Probably could use another one, and you need to start assessing Barrial because he's just it wasn't good for him. He only played 324 minutes, so it's still young. Kubo, very good. Zhao, maybe haven't gotten as much as you would have liked from him so far. Jurgen Locadia has been a bust. A giant, utter bust. Valued at $8.8 million on Transfermarkt. He's done it in other places. He has not done much of anything for you in Cincinnati. His loan is up June 30th. I do not see that sticking. I'm almost wondering if you let him go back, if you can, in January, and you start fresh with a new forward.
Yeah.
You brought in from Hoffenheim, and his loan is up June 30th. He only played one match. Franco Kovacevic. Do you want to see what he does in the first half of the year and make a decision? There's no way you pick up the purchase on Locadia, not with what you've seen. And you've got Brandon Vasquez, who is a very solid number 2 forward in this league. So Cincinnati, you need left back, you need right back. You probably need a winger, although it might be more of a reserve role. I think you need a starting number 9.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can get out of Locadia's loan until June. So you might be looking at a June acquisition of a 9. But you need 2 starting defenders, and you got some decisions to make. Miami, boof. I don't know what happened yesterday with Miami. That was massively confusing.
Mm-hmm.
You had a report come from The Athletic that Diego Alonso was fired. Then you had oops, we pushed that out too early. Then you had he's not fired, but he thought he was going to be fired. Then you had Michelle Kaufman in the Miami Herald say that it was a very tense meeting. Alonso thought he might be fired, or thought he was fired, or whatever. And I guess he said some things to some people, who then said some things to some other people outside the organization. Then you got a report. Then you got that pulled. Miami hasn't necessarily committed to him long term. They said they're still assessing the situation. I mean, it's madness. It's absolute madness. I mean, I don't know if you're playing games with this. I don't know if you're just this confused.
Yeah.
I don't know if the communication is that poor. I have no idea. So that's a massive question to the side. The lineup, you've got things to figure out. Goalkeeper, I don't know if you're going to go with John McCarthy as the regular starter. I think he could be, but that's a decision you have to assess. You don't have a left back. Need to figure that out. You've got LGP, you've got Nicolas Figal as center backs, you've got 2 young ones with no experience or very little experience in MLS, and Christian Macun and Jairo Quinteros. Maybe you need an extra center back. I think you're still trying to negotiate with Andres Reyes. Right back, you've got Dylan Nealis, who was a pleasant surprise. Is he your starting right back, or are you going to go get somebody who's more dynamic going forward, and Nealis becomes a rotation, a third center back at times? We'll see how that goes. Midfield, you've got 3 that can start in Ulloa, Matuidi, and Pizarro. Matuidi and Pizarro are going to play and are going to be significant. Is Ulloa your 6? Or do you need to go get a 6? And you need depth. Jay Chapman is the only one with any significant experience. George Acosta was injured this season. The wings, you've got Pellegrini and Morgan, who are both on the left. Morgan can play on the right, but he's more effective on the left, I think. He could go either way if you decide those are the 2 you want, but you need depth. You don't have it. Julian Carranza didn't develop much this year. I think he's a talented player. He showed flashes, but he's not going to play significantly with Gonzalo Higuain in town. And Robbie Robinson either needs to play on the wings or needs to be loaned somewhere. So you got a goalkeeper question. You've got at least a left back question and possibly a right back question, a number 6 question, and maybe another wing question. And you need to look at the development of Pellegrini and Carranza because you invested pretty strongly in them. So that's 5 potential starter questions. And as Jason Nix says, there are a lot of rumors out there about Rodolfo Pizarro going back to Mexico.
Yeah.
It's been rumors. It's just been talk so far. But if they can recoup on their investment, they might do it. Even if they get most of it back, they might do it. Because the thing about Miami is we don't know what's going to happen managerial-wise. We don't know what's going to happen sporting director-wise. You could get somebody come in and say, well, I'm blowing this up. So that he could be a piece in doing that to open up a DP slot and to open up money if you bring a decent return back for him. So I wouldn't put it past them, Knicks, but I don't know if any of the rumors are solid just yet. It might be a little too early for that. So Miami's got a lot of work to do. Nashville doesn't as much when you compare the 2 expansion teams. I think Nashville did a pretty good job. And that leads us in, John, to something we haven't done in a minute. It's true. Do you have to dance your intro?
I think so.
Okay. I'm really going to have to cut this down or find a shorter intro if you're going to dance, because it's a little disturbing. What's the name of the segment, John?
Hey, I saw this.
This one's not necessarily you saw this, but you have a question about this.
Yeah, I do. And it has to do basically with what's happening today and this week. And it was just through the observations of the anticipation of what's going to be happening with the expansion draft and waiver and reentry and free agency and all that kind of stuff. And so as I was putting on my very small thinking cap this morning, it doesn't quite fit my 7 5/8 head. It might be a little shorter than that. If you, dear listener, dear watcher, dear both, were assembling a team and doing it in Major League Soccer, how would you do it? Where would you start? What's your approach? Do you work it like Nashville did? Do you do it like Miami did with glitzy stars up top? Do you do it like Atlanta United? And I know that there's probably a lot of bias in that approach considering where we're based. What would your approach be in assembling an expansion side? How would you start it? Do you go internationally? How much internationally do you do? Where do you put those positions? That kind of stuff. So if you were assembling a squad, how would you do it?
For me, it's always building the spine of the team. And I see some of the rumors about Agustin Almendra. We'll get into him in a minute. Okay. So spine of the team for me. Yep. If I am looking at how I want to build, it's not just defense, Abby, because then you can become one-dimensional. I would look at my biggest impact players as goalkeeper. You got to keep the ball out of the net. Just no question. You got to have a goalkeeper you can trust. Center back, leader. I need somebody good in possession for the way I would want to play. But I'm looking for a leader in that role. Holding midfield, and you can take it a couple different ways depending on what you're looking around it. You could go 6, like true defensive midfielder, depending on your system, your philosophy. You could go with a game controlling kind of 8 who's a box to box. I think you need a 10. And again, depending on the way you look at it, it could be a 6 and a 10. It could be a 6 and an 8. It could be an 8 and a 10. You need somebody to create.
Yeah.
And you need somebody to score goals. Like, you've got to have those elements. That's how you can be successful. And then I think your next tier in this league from the jump as an expansion team, once you identify where you want to go in those roles, then you fill in from the back to the front. Because I think from the back to the front, you can maybe make the most impact defensively early on and be solid as you get better. The Nashville approach. What Nashville didn't hit on was the number 9. That was what held them back for a lot of the season. So goalkeeper, Joe Willis, very good. Really good pickup and good value too.
Yes.
Center back, you were solid, and then you added Walker Zimmerman, and you became top-notch. Holding midfield, you stressed it with 2. You doubled up with Dax McCarty, with Anibal Godoy. You added Hani Mukhtar as a creator. Excellent. So you went even stronger on the midfield. I like it. You didn't get the number 9, so that's where you sacrificed. If you look at that construction of the spine, goalkeeper, center back, 2 central mids, and a forward, they missed on the forward and added another top central mid from the jump, which is fine. I mean, they did well, but they were limited, right?
Right.
Okay, so if you're Austin, let's look at what they've done so far, and then we'll take a look at the expansion draft and what they could be looking to do. Left back in Ben Sweat, right back in Nick Lima, you're in really good shape there. Those guys became available. I think you go get them. I think you got a good price. Julio Cascante is your center back. good. I don't think he is like the guy you need. So I think you still need a stud center back. You need a goalkeeper. You got Ulysses Segura as a central mid. Again, solid, but not what you need in terms of being the spine. So you've got to add your 2 strong central midfielders to build around. And you need a number 9. What they've done so far, though, they've been able to fill in some of the pieces around that. So you've got Sweat, Lima, Cascante on the back. That's 3 of 4 good defenders. You add a top center back, you're good. You can roll with that. You need a 6. And you got to think, too, Josh Wolf is a Greg Berhalter guy. Josh Wolf was an assistant under Berhalter in Columbus for a number of years. You would assume he's going to play in that way, a 4-3-3 kind of setup, very possession-oriented, controlling the game that way. So you need a 6. They had Will Trapp. They're not getting Will Trapp here for Wolf, but that's who they had in Columbus for a long time. You need somebody who's good on the ball. So that's going to be a key. You could get a 10 or an 8, depending on what is out there and what you can grab. Either one could work here. What gives you a little bit of flexibility with this one is you have a good left winger in Cecilio Dominguez. So maybe you could say, you know what? We're going to play through the flanks in the final third a little bit more. We don't need that number 10 as much. We could go 6 and 2/8. We could go with a younger 10 to develop. We've got Dominguez on the wing. We're good. Rodney Redis, a little bit more of a wild card. We're still kind of getting to know him. John Gallagher, I think, is a great piece for an expansion team because he can play up top. He can play on the right. He can play on the left. He could play centrally if you need. He could even play right back if you need. That's the kind of players you need in that second tier. So they've done well so far. The expansion draft today, they're not going to go get a bunch of starters in this. You're looking to fill in a lot of your pieces around that spine. I went through, let's start first with Tom Bogert, went through the best players available in the expansion draft. The one thing we don't know is the contracts because you're assuming contracts. You're probably looking here for guys that are minimal cap hits as much as possible because you want to go spend a lot of that extra allocation money that you still have in bringing players in. So you've got your designated player spots. You've got a couple of those. You've got these U22 spots, it sounds like. You've got TAM. You can go impact what you need to impact with that. And you still got work to do in your spine. So I'm not looking for studs in the expansion draft because they're not available generally. There's some designated players there, but I'm not taking somebody else's designated player that didn't fit. Like Tomas Martinez, and Tom Bogert has him listed. I like Tomas Martinez. I think he's a good player. I'm not picking him up. He was brought here as a designated player from Braga. He came from River. He hasn't been successful in the league. I'm going to go get somebody else. So I'm looking at extra pieces. They've got Will Trapp on here, but everybody's saying Will Trapp's going to sign with Minnesota. So I'm not wasting a pick potentially there unless I think I can get. Well, if he's a free agent, he's a free agent after you can't sign him. So, yeah, it doesn't even matter. One that we agreed on in our picks is Jalil Anibaba. Veteran, he can play center back, he can play right back. If you had to go with that back four of what you have plus Anibaba, it's functional. It can work. I like that pick a lot. And you can only pick up one player from each team. So Bogert's got Dominique Badji. I'm not wasting a pick on a failed attacker. I'm not. Badji, I don't think, is a backup yet in this league, but I don't think he's a starter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm going Anibaba. That's my pick from Nashville, and I would absolutely pick him. Other names that Bogert has, Derek Cornelius, Canadian international center back from Vancouver. Good. It's a good argument. And if you decide that you want to go with Cornelius instead of Anibaba, or you want to go both to really provide your depth at center back, you could. I wouldn't. I would probably want to be thinking TAM type of signing for my center back to go with Cascante. I'm not going to do that on somebody who's played 30 games for Vancouver and would take up an international slot. I don't know if Cornelius is quite good enough to be that guy. I'd rather upgrade there, take Anibaba, who's going to be reserve rotation, and go get somebody outside for my other center back. So I would not go Cornelius. If you decide, I don't like Anibaba, I'm going to go different on Nashville, or I'm not going to pick a Nashville player, and Cornelius becomes my reserve rotation guy, okay, but that's an international slot that you're using for that. Yeah. Bogart's got Ryan Mara, and he's on my list. We'll come back to goalkeepers. David Bingham's on the list here for Bogart. We'll come back to goalkeepers because that's a separate decision we got to talk about. Kamal Miller is on the list. He's on my list. Really good pickup. He is an international. I think he can start in this league. I thought he was really good for Orlando. He's young. He's on a good contract number, according to Bogart. I couldn't imagine he's on a high number. He played a good bit. He can play at a left back and a center back. 100% I'm taking Kamal Miller. See, Ricky brings up Pablo Piatti, and that goes back into that conversation about I'm not picking up a failed DP from somebody else.
Right.
Now, the case for Piatti for Austin is that you've got a couple of guys on the left side. You've got Gallagher who can play anywhere in that front three. If you're not going to go spend bigger on a DP and you like Piatti and you can have the conversation, like, do you want to come to Austin? Are you going to be motivated, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe, because I like Piatti and I don't think I'd say he's a failed designated player, but I would go elsewhere. I would go completely elsewhere. Uri Rosell is on the list here. I would not take him or Akindele, who are on Bogart's list, because I'm taking Kamal Miller. You can only take one. Right. Kamal Miller is one that I would take and stick with. Maybe be my starter. Maybe that pushes Cascante into more of a reserve role. I really like Kamal Miller. I think he's a very strong player. The other guys on my list, so we mentioned Anibaba and Miller. Patrick Mullins, because he is a reserve forward. He has become a super sub. He can start 10, 12 games for you, but he comes in and impacts games, and he's a smart player. I think he knows his role. I think he knows he's not going to be a starting number 9 in this league, but he's carved out a really good career as an impact player off the bench. Good salary cap number. By all accounts, a good guy in the locker room to have in your group, especially for an expansion team. Patrick Mullins would be my pick from Toronto. And then Sean Nealis from the Red Bulls. Another reserve defender who can play minutes, and he's played minutes for the Red Bulls. He showed up in some big moments. I think he might be able to play on the outside if you need it. But if you go with Miller, Nealis, Anibaba, you've got your back line pretty well settled. Because then without, except for the expensive center back. Because you go back to Austin's lineup. Ben Sweat, Nick Lima on the outside, Cascante in the middle. You add an expensive center back, not a designated player, but underneath that. So that's 4. You add Anibaba, Nealis, and Miller. Anibaba can play on the right and in the middle. Miller can play on the left and in the middle. Nealis, I think, can play on the right and in the middle, but definitely in the middle. You've got depth. You've got coverage. You've got 7 center backs with the outside signing, or 7 defenders. You're handled. Like, you don't need to even worry about it at that point. You're really good. So I would clean up there. The other guys that jumped out to me, Kappelhoff from Chicago, good player. He's had injury issues. I think he's really technical, so he'd fit. A little bit more expensive, so he's going to take up more cap space. Would you rather just go get your own guy outside? Probably would. We mentioned Uri Rosell, who would fit the bill here. And if you decide that I like Kamal Miller, but Uri Rosell could be my starting number 6, which I think he could. He's getting up there, and he isn't a fit for everybody, but I think he's a fit for what Josh Wolf wants to do. I'd consider it. I would go Miller. I think I could get that 6 elsewhere. Other guys specifically available in the expansion draft, because there's a bunch of names on it, but you have to then look a step further to see who's going to be a free agent, so I don't need to waste an expansion draft pick, and who's going to go into the reentry draft, so I don't have to waste an expansion draft pick. The other ones that jumped out to me were Maxi Urruti, who could be that right wing, could be a forward up top in a rotation, extremely hard worker. He would help set an example in training. I think Josh Wolf would like him. I think he'd be a good fit. He doesn't produce a ton of goals. I've never been able to figure this out because I like Maxio Urruti's game. He just doesn't give you enough goals. Tesho Akindele, but again, there's other pieces on Orlando that I'm going to put ahead of him, and I can go get other players there. The other one I really like, and I went for Mullins instead, is Tsubasa Endo. Another one that is good price, hard worker, right wing and up top. He's always been just on the outside at Toronto. I think he's produced when he's had opportunities. I really like Tsubasa Endo. I'll go Mullins instead. If the contract numbers are really different with those two, and I'm going to save money by going Endo significantly, I could do that. I'd be okay with that. But I'd go Mullins. I think Mullins is it doesn't matter what order you pick him in because there's nobody you're competing with. But Mullins would be my priority here. Let's go back to goalkeeper.
Right.
Because hold on. Because I left the spot open.
Yeah.
Because you have to make a decision. Are you going to look for a starting goalkeeper here in the expansion draft? Or are you going to go outside to get a goalkeeper, outside the league? Or are you going to sign Brian Rowe as a free agent? If you're going to sign Rowe or go outside, then you're not looking for a starting goalkeeper here. You're looking for a reserve. And I think you need to be careful about that because we've seen it sometimes where you have two starters and they rotate or you don't settle on one. If you're going to go get one, and Rowe would be a starter for me, I'd have no problem signing Brian Rowe as a free agent. But if you're not settled on him, then you're looking at Ryan Mara and Zach McMath. I think those are your two that can be starting goalkeepers for you. That'd work. That'd be fine. If you're going to go for Rowe or if you're going to bring in somebody from the outside, then I think you're looking at Connor Sparrow or Earl Edwards Jr. as reserves because they're going to be inexpensive. Guys who've played a little bit, guys I think who are comfortable as the number 2, and you go ahead and snag them, and you solve that problem. You've just got to make the decision on, do you think Rowe is the guy? Do you think Mara is the guy? Do you think McMath is the guy? And you have to adjust your strategy accordingly.
Yeah, because now, what is Mira's status with Red Bulls?
Well, he's available in the expansion draft, but he is under contract. See, that's what you have to look at, and that's where I think some of these fantasy drafts with expansion drafts don't follow the rules, and you got to be really careful about it. He is not available outside of the expansion draft. So you could pick him here because he's unprotected, but you couldn't sign him as a free agent. You couldn't get him in the re-entry draft because he's under contract for next season. I'm double-checking, but I double-checked earlier.
And the reason I asked was because if you got Nealis, then you couldn't get Mira, correct?
True. And that would be then a fallback. You'd have to then work backwards. Do you look at Kappelhoff at that point? Do you look at going to a Maxio Urruti? If you don't take Nealis, if you go Mara and you say, all right, is there another center back here? Kappelhoff's the only one, but I think he's going to be too expensive. Urruti could be expensive, but he's going to impact things more for me. So if that's the case, if I decide Mara's the guy, then that scratches Nealis. Then you've got Anibaba and Miller as your two center backs you're drafting. You're probably going to need to get like a Eric Zavaleta as a free agent, somebody along those lines. And I would go Maxi Urruti then as my other pick. But that's why I probably wouldn't go Mara, and I'm glad you brought that up because you have to think moving parts. I'd rather have Nealis than Mara because of what's available here. I could go sign Brian Rowe. I could draft Zach McMath instead.
Right.
So I could draft McMath, be the starter day one, and draft Nealis and get contributions. So I'm good with that. Now, here's the other thing. You look at some of these guys we're talking about. Let's say Kamal Miller. Do you think Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver might be really interested in a Canadian international center back, left back who's played a lot at 23 years old?
Yep.
Do you make a call and say, hey, Ali Curtis, I could take Kamal Miller for you because he's not going to be available to you in re-entry or as a free agent, I can grab him. What do you want? What are you going to give me?
Mm-hmm.
That's the other strategy here. And that's where you look at guys that maybe are not the smartest pickup for an Austin where you're trying to build something and you know you're going to go sign a bunch of guys from outside, but they could be assets. You know, if you picked Miller and flipped him, because he can start in this league, and he might not start for you if you do what we talked about with that back line. Okay, pick him, flip him. You could go that way. If somebody wants a goalkeeper and they really like Mara or McMath, you could pick him, flip him. You know, Aruti possibly could be that guy. I don't think Rossell's that guy. I think you would rather have him than anybody else. Those are the ones that jump out to me in this. There's not as many as usual in this kind of flip mode. Miller's the one that I keep coming back to. Because if I'm Toronto with the back line that I have, and Toronto's getting a little up there in age on that back line, with Gonzalez over 30, with Mavinga, I think, turning 30 next season, and with Julian Dunn and Rocco Romeo as your other center backs, you don't have a left back. Could say that's Kamal Miller. If I'm Toronto, that's exactly what I'm doing. And then I'm saying, hey, first off, then I don't want you to take Patrick Mullins. I'd like to keep him. Second, I'll trade you I would be asking for Liam Frazier. If I'm Austin, I would be asking for Liam Frazier, and that's my 6. Because I think he can be that. I don't think Toronto would give him up. I wouldn't. So then it's like, okay, I'm going to need allocation money and a lot of it, and I'm going to need Noble Okello, who could be a central midfielder for you. Might need a little more time to develop, but we've seen him in USL. I think he's a good player. Maybe you want to go get a Nick De Leon, who's a veteran who can play a whole bunch of positions for you, something like that. But Toronto would be a perfect fit for Kamal Miller, but he'd have to go through Austin to get there. That can also affect the strategy.
All right, so then recapping your 5 picks, and this is including
my 5 picks, assuming you keep all of them.
Okay, assuming you keep all of them.
And not assuming you're flipping. Now, because you can't predict the flips. Okay. Miller's the one that could be the most likely to flip, but I'd take him anyway.
Yeah.
So my 5 that I would pick, because I would sign Brian Rowe as a free agent.
Yeah.
That would be my goalkeeper, or I'm going to go get somebody else if I'm not sold. I'm not going to use a pick on Mara or McMath. So I will go reserve goalkeeper, and I think I would lean to Sparrow, but you could sell me on Edwards. Either one's fine. Reserve goalkeeper, one of those 2. Jalil Anibaba, Sean Nealis, Kamal Miller, Patrick Mullins. Those are my other 4. Reserve goalkeeper and those 4.
Okay.
If I'm keeping all of them, if I've tried to flip, if I've tried to talk to people, I got nothing coming my way, that's my expansion draft. But I don't think that will happen because I think they'll find a trade partner for at least one. Yeah. Maybe 2. Maybe somebody wants Maxi Urruti. Maybe somebody, wants Tesho Akindele, and you go with him instead of Miller and you flip him. Maybe. Maybe somebody wants one of those goalkeepers, Mara or McMath, and you take that and you flip it. Maybe. My prediction will be out of that 5 that I would take if I'm keeping them, 2 get picked. There's one wild card that we don't see coming, probably a very young player that they're high on who we haven't seen much of. And at least 1 pick gets flipped, maybe 2. So I think I'll hit 2 of those.
Well, and you're still batting 400 though. That gets
I'll take it. These things are impossible to predict. I mean, you can mock draft it all you want, but you don't know who's going to trade for what. Like that's the part. You're not picking 5 guys to keep 5 guys generally. That just hasn't really happened in expansion draft history. Okay. That's the expansion draft. That's at 6:00. I think there'll be moves after it. And there could be moves not involving Austin. There could be moves involving Austin. Atlanta did trade John Gallagher to Austin. Does Atlanta have their eyes on somebody in the expansion draft? Or did they want that option? Do they now go back to Austin and say, hey, we did you a solid. We had a handshake, whatever, about if there was somebody we wanted in the expansion draft. We'll give you a little bit more. throw a little more your way. But, we would really like to have so-and-so. And I don't know who that would be. I don't know. I don't think you need any of those center backs because you've got good depth. You're not going to go in there to get Russell. I don't think you'd go in there to get Urruti because you've got cover on the wings. So my guess is that wouldn't be the case, but you never know. You never know. That's what's so crazy about this because there's so much contractually that we don't know. There's so much with the cap space stuff that we just don't know. So there's a lot of guessing. But Austin can do well with who's available. I think they can have a productive day.
What about somebody like Danny Houston out of San Jose?
Well, I'm not picking him here because he's a re-entry draft guy.
Okay.
Because, then unless you like his contract number and you're going to pick up his option. And again, this is where we don't know. Because he goes into the re-entry. This is what's complicated, and this is why it's very hard to follow this stuff. So Danny Houston goes into the re-entry draft. He is out of contract. My understanding is you would have to sign him for a certain amount, either exactly what he made this past year or a certain mandatory raise over what he made this last year. And we don't know what he made this last year because those numbers were never published by the MLSPA. You can go back to 2019 and look and guess and put an escalator on it and figure it out. But Houston, I don't have to get him here. If I decide he's my number 9, and I'd probably go for something better on the outside, but I don't know what Austin's budget is. I don't have to use a pick because I can pick him first in the re-entry draft.
There you go. Okay.
Let me see if they pick first. I might have changed that where they don't pick first. This is, again, the rules change on a regular basis, and let's see. Because if they pick first, then it's a no-brainer. That's December 17th, so that's coming up. No, they do pick first, so that's why you don't have to use it. So anybody in re-entry, and the other names I had there that you might look at, Houston, if you want to get crazy with a failed designated player that maybe didn't get a huge opportunity in his home, Josue Colman, Orlando, who spent most of the time on loan. He's still a young player. I like Colman a lot. That's a tough one. Vaco, I like him as a player. Do you want to build around him? Okay. Joe Corona, Brant Bronico, 2 really good central midfielders in this league. I like Bronico a lot, and I think he'd probably be a good price. If you pick him in the re-entry, that's where you're either picking up their option or if they're out of contract, you're picking them up at last year's number, I think, plus a certain amount. It's a bona fide offer, and there's a definition to that. If you pick him in the first stage, you're automatically picking up the option. There's no negotiation. Ziegler goes into the re-entry as well. I'm not going to go with the first stage of re-entry on him. I'd want to negotiate a smaller number for him if I wanted to get him. If I decided he's my center back and he's my leader, cool. I'm going to hope that he gets all the way through re-entry, and then the second stage, I'll pick him and I'll negotiate a new deal with him. But those are the ones that come. Oh, Mark Shakowski is another one in re-entry. Another player I've always liked. Free agents, and again, you're not going to pick somebody who's a free agent in the expansion draft because you're wasting a pick. You can go sign them. Freddie Montero, if you want a veteran goal scorer who might be at the last stage of his career. Warren Creval, good number 6. I think he can play in this league. Perry Kitchen, it hasn't been great for him at the LA Galaxy. It's been good for him before that. Eric Zavaleta and Brian Rowe, who we mentioned before. And that's the one that I'm really zeroed in on. If they don't want him as their number 1 goalkeeper, that's fine, but he'd probably be mine out of all the goalkeepers you can get.
Yeah, and the notion that you can wait until free agency to negotiate with him.
You're not picking them in expansion. That's
right,
the thing you got to be
getting
careful
him in the expansion draft.
Right.
You're waiting through all that process.
Right. Abby asks, why do the rules constantly change? Welcome to MLS. Look, part of it is because the league continues to evolve, and the league is trying to maintain some version of parity. They want teams to be able to get better. They want the teams that are lesser to become better. I understand that. it's gotten, with all the different rules that they've added, all these different elements, it's gotten a little too convoluted. There's too many different things. Simplify it. I would lump everybody that's not a free agent into one process because, I mean, this year, for example, the waiver process only has nine players that are eligible for it. So why are we doing a whole waiver process? Andrew Carlton is in there. You know, other former homegrowns that didn't really click. Isaac Anking from New England, Nicholas Firmino from New England, Ben Mines, who's had injury history with the Red Bulls. Just lump them all into the reentry and do the 2 stages with that. I think that makes some sense. If you want to pick up the player's option that their previous club declined, cool, pick them in the first section of it. If you want to renegotiate and just pick up their rights, do that in the second section, be done with it. And don't have those a week apart. Like, have those a day apart or something. Come on, let's speed up the process. Free agency needs to continue to expand. Players out of contract, if they were in another league, they could go sign wherever they want. I know MLS, again, is trying to keep things organized. It's a single entity, but expand free agency further, and let's move on with it. So you're in 2 buckets. You're out of contract or your option is declined. You're a free agent, or you go through a reentry process, and then you become a free agent if you're not picked. Done.
News out of Charlotte. They finally have announced that club president will be Nick Kelly, coming in from InBev. That officially hit the wires.
Yeah, no big surprise there. That was what we expected with what we had seen reported. So Charlotte continuing to grow and build. I like what they're doing. I think they'll benefit from the extra year to develop. That's going to help them. Austin, I like what they're doing so far. I feel good about it. Let's get into more rumors and innuendo on the other side of John telling us about Steve Apolinski.
Apolinski and Associates, LLC, proud supporters of everything soccer down here in the SDH network. For wrongful death and serious injury matters, there's only one communication that you need to make, and it is with said law firm, Apolinski and Associates, LLC. A couple different ways that you can do it. You can shoot Steve an email directly, steve@aa-legal.com. You can also give him a buzz. Pick up the telephone, large or small, landline, cell phone, whatever, 404-377-9191. Princess phones also work as well. You can get a free consultation that way, too. Or you can go on the World Wide Web, and in the taskbar, hit aa-legal.com, large device or small, hit the enter key, the return key, the arrow key, whatever advances it forward. aa-legal.com pops up, as does a pop-up window, because that's what pop-up windows do. They pop up 24/7, 365 and a quarter. Thank you, Chris Hutchison. And you can have a conversation with whoever that is inside the pop-up window. Actually, I don't know if they're inside the pop-up window physically, but they're on the other end of the communication chain when it comes to the pop-up window. So you can have a conversation right then and there to have your questions answered there as well. Over $40 million in judgments in over 30 years of work for their clients in Georgia and Alabama for wrongful death and serious injury matters. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the top 100 firms in this here state of Georgia for wrongful death and serious injury matters. It is Apolinski and Associates, LLC. The website is aa-legal.com.
You went long and it got weird.
Just went sideways a little bit.
It might have spun around. Might have been more than a sideways. I think it spun out. Started as an 8, questionable decisions, ended as a 4 from Mazzano. I got a 5 from Clayton Paus. Yeah, it went really
So the
weird.
questionable decisions cut the grade in half.
Yeah, it's a tough crowd. J-Dub gave you a 6. Good cadence. Nice unicorn reference.
That's what we're here for.
4.
And any kind of random references that we can throw into promos and those kinds of things.
4 from Williamson. 7 from Abby.
Oh, thank you, Abby.
You made her laugh.
That's what we're here for.
I don't know if you intended to, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Interesting little development. I don't have all my sounders today because things are a little strange on the interwebs, but we got this. The Chinese Football Association has introduced its strictest financial measures yet with a new salary cap for domestic and foreign players throughout the professional game. It will be an end to players going there for a big payday.
Mm-hmm.
Salary cap. I think I've heard of that before.
Capped at £572,000 a year for domestics. Foreign players can now earn a maximum of £2.7 million a year. Oscar, who some of you might remember at Chelsea, is making just under £19 million a year at Shanghai SIPG. He would take an 86% pay cut under the current situation that is being presented by the Chinese Super League as an idea.
Wow, here's another one that Nick might want to be following. Daniele Triolo, who covers things for a number of different outlets in Italy, focuses on Milan. Per Sport Media Set in Italy, Milan is working on a deal for next season, directed by our good friend Mino Raiola, to bring Erling Haaland to Milan. There's, I think, a release clause on him that's not too crazy at $75 million. I think they're saying they wouldn't go for that. They would try to make a player deal and cash to get Erling Haaland, who is starting to speak about things, and Raiola starting to speak about Haaland. And Erling Haaland was very complimentary of Milan and his boy Hauge. So, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Silly season is going to be mad silly.
Yes.
And that's just the January part. That's not even getting into the summer next year. That's going to be even more ridiculous with Pogba.
We ain't even to January yet, and January is going to be crazy.
January is going to be crazy because Barcelona is in crisis. Real Madrid, I think, is out of crisis, but they've got to figure out Sergio Ramos. Barcelona's got to figure out a lot of things. It sounds like they got their salary issue sorted out, although now they're going to be delaying it over 4 years. But if you can't make your payments on time, you got to spread it out somehow, right? So they would expect to be making money at some point when things get back to normal. So that's not crazy. I get it. But they got a presidential race to deal with, and now Joan Laporta is putting up billboards outside of the Santiago Bernabeu in Madrid, which is crazy because I don't know how many Barcelona members are in that area, but it is a symbol of we're going to be in your face again. So maybe that plays really well. That election's on January 24th. The window opens before that. Lionel Messi can sign a pre-contract to go to PSG.
Yeah.
And according to some folks in the French capital, Robin Berner of Football Transfers says that PSG are growing increasingly confident of signing Lionel Messi on a free transfer from Barcelona, having told their stores around the French capital to brace themselves for an influx of business based around shirt sales for the Argentine star.
Brace yourselves.
If they add Lionel Messi, they better be bracing themselves. I mean,
they better make sure that their web store has a lockdown server that doesn't crash.
Better be ready. Their main store has a lockdown door that doesn't get busted into.
Yeah.
You got a lot to deal with that.
Could you imagine just the late Christmas presents of everybody rushing to the PSG store to get their Messi jerseys?
It ain't about Christmas presents. It's just about I want a Lionel Messi PSG jersey because it's never happened. It's going to be crazy if that happens. And, I mean, do they get really bold and try to pull him for January?
Yes.
They're going to have to pay a transfer fee, and Barcelona needs it. So, otherwise they could just wait till the summer. They've got an issue. They've got a few issues. They got Neymar and Mbappe that they got to get locked down. If they get them locked down, I think they can get Messi. I think it might be a free. I think they might wait that because I don't know the financial fair play implications here. If they get him on a free, that helps a lot. So if you don't have to pay a transfer fee, you'd like to do that. You're not going to have him for Champions League anyway, but and if you're looking at just that Champions League matchup where they play one another, if you sign him to a pre-contract, it's going to be really awkward for him to play against PSG for Barcelona in Champions League. Even if he stays out his contract at Barcelona, that's still going to be really awkward, and I'll be curious to see what Ronald Koeman would do with it.
Yeah.
If you pay the transfer fee to bring him in January, then you can't use him in Champions League because he's already tied to Barca in the competition. It's going to be weird. It's going to be really weird in January, and it's going to get weirder in the summer. Haaland going to Milan as a conversation. Pogba going to Juve as a conversation. Ronaldo maybe going somewhere other than Juventus. PSG trying to build a bigger juggernaut. Coaching carousels. I mean, nobody likes Thomas Tuchel, but he's going to be working somewhere. Still don't know why he's a bad guy yet. I'm working on it. It's going to all get... Pochettino will be somewhere before the start of next season. It's going to get crazy. It's going to get crazy here, too. Atlanta United, we know the rumors. Everybody knows the rumors. Nothing yet. Game on Wednesday. Does it happen after that? Possibly. Haven't heard any other rumors about Gabriel Heinze, so there you go. Ragamuffin says cup-tied rules aren't in effect anymore. Is that true? I did not know that, Ragamuffin, if that's the case. So what Ragamuffin is saying, and this might need to be, well, it definitely need to be fact-checked, no offense.
Yes.
PSG could go sign their opponent's top attacking player ahead of the round of 16 matchup and play them against that team. Unless there's some deal in the transfer saying you can't play against us this year or whatever, which Barcelona would absolutely need to be demanding. But still, I did not know that they had gotten rid of that rule. I'm very intrigued by that comment. John, do some research.
I am doing some research.
Okay, thank you. Mizano says CR7 to Austin due to the big bucks from McConaughey.
CR7 is Verde.
No, that's not happening. Not all right. I don't even have the sounder to play it. Sorry, Clayton Pause. Okay, let's get back into Atlanta as things get weird on my computer. Okay. Gabriel Heinze, we know the talk. Now Agustin Almendra has been linked to Atlanta per Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic. Is there more to that? I don't know. Maybe. I've been looking to see what else is out there about it as this just continues to get weird. Yes, there we go. Stop beeping at me. Thank you, Johannes. You do research faster than John. So last year, and is this accurate for this year? Accurate now. You can register a maximum of 3 new eligible players. Since last season, however, it no longer matters if those players have played for another team in the competition. Did not know that. Have we seen much of this so far? Because I don't remember it happening too much.
Have not seen much of it, yes. Rule 45.01 is what Johannes is quoting.
Yeah, no, you can register new players. That part's not the rule. That's not the issue. It's 4502 that's the issue. Any or all of the players from the above quota of 3 may have been fielded for another club in the qualifying phase, playoffs, or group stage. So that is a change, and that's a fairly recent change. Thank you, Ragamuffin. Your facts are correct. Thank you, Johannes. That's right, Holland. Yeah, that's right. Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Man, there's so much. I got to try to keep up with MLS rules. I can't keep up with UEFA rules changing. Man, crazy. Okay. Agustin Almendra. We had a bunch of questions because of the rumors up. Cesar Luis Merlo has reported that he will return to training for Boca on Friday and that Gabriel Heinze is in pursuit of him, and Merlo has reported that Heinze is coming to Atlanta. So those dots all connect. The Boca in English podcast is going to be one you're going to want to be following for a lot of this. They do great work anyway, especially if you're a Boca Juniors fan and you speak English. They're really good at what they do, and they will share a lot of the reports that's out there in Argentina in English for you. So you might want to start following CABJ_English, the Boca in English podcast. Almendra is under 22. He could potentially fall under that U22 rule, although the explanations of that have been very, very confusing. So I'm going to wait until that gets actually put into writing or we get more concrete information on it, because one way it was reported was that you could have 3 designated players and then only 1 U22, Or you could have 2 designated players and then 3 U20. Like, none of it really linked up. I think the way it goes and the change to the designated player rule in this new CBA is that third designated player has to be what would have previously been a TAM player. So it knocks down the ceiling a little bit on that. I think if you have 2 regular designated players, you could have that spot opens up if they're under 22. It opens up bigger, and then you have your 3 U22 spots. I think if you have, well, that would be it. That's essentially it. Because if you have 3 designated players, one of them has to fit in the new parameters. It's still complicated. You should have a U22 extra spot in addition to Eric Lopez joining. You do have a senior roster spot. You do have an international slot. So all those check off. If Almendra fits under the U22 initiative, it basically gives you the ability to sign a designated player type player that is not making a huge salary. I think the salary limit is the maximum cap hit. Hold on the Moreno talk, Clayton Poss, because that's going to make it even more confusing. We'll get to that in a minute. So Almendra should be able to fit under that. I don't think his salary would be more than $600,000. I think you can make that work. The transfer could be high. I think he's valued around the $10 million mark. That's been fairly consistent. He's fallen out of the favor with the current staff. He was playing more previously. He hasn't been playing a lot lately. He's a very, very good talent. He was looked at as one of the top young Argentine players before he fell out with the new staff. I remember the way Boca has went here lately. Schelotto was there. Won leagues, couldn't get over the Libertadores with River. He goes to LA Galaxy. They made a change. It didn't work out. It didn't last very long. They made another change. So it's been a lot of turnover here lately. Now you've got Russo in. Alfaro left. Alfaro did well in the league, but little, I thought, out of place in the way he handled the River match the second time they met in Libertadores in the semis. Too passive. Didn't work for Boca. He's gone. You bring in Russo. Veteran, established, maybe not looking at developing young talent like an Almendra. He probably needs to go. If you could get him in a $10 million kind of range, keep the salary under $600,000, he should fit in the U22 initiative. Yes, please. Great fit. Great cap fit. Everything is great with that. So keep an eye on the Argentine media on this. Right now, this is the thing you got to understand with the way they do things. You will see a lot of repeating. If you're looking on Twitter, for example, you will see a lot of repetition of things. It will start with one of your major sources or outlets. Merlo is one. There's others at TIC. There's others at TNT, the Turner Network in Argentina. There's others at ESPN, although they don't break quite as much out of Argentina. Once it hits one of them, it will then go into like the radio shows that are team specific. It'll go into potentially interviews following up on it with those shows. It'll go into then more of the tabloidy kind of places. But you'll see the same things repeated at a lot of different spots. So Almendra hasn't trained in the last 3 months. He has asked to return to training. That is one thing going on. Okay, now also the talk about is his future elsewhere, which is a safe bet. Atlanta United's name is continuing to come up, and this is from Felipe's report. That's where it started, at least from what I've seen. I haven't seen it elsewhere just yet, where it started anyway. So he refused to train for 3 months because he wanted to go. So that's something that's interesting. Boca fans are saying that they might send him directly to the reserves first. There's a lot of question about position, and he's a tough one because he's young. Like people are going back and forth on is he a 6, is he an 8? He's a central midfielder that can do different roles. if Gabriel Heinze is the manager here, you really need to get out of rigid position thought because it's going to baffle you at times. It is about roles and it's about responsibilities. And even then, it's about switches. Because a couple of the principles here, you don't want a player playing a position and not a man defensively. It's, yes, you are the right back. Okay. There's nobody in your area. There's nobody there for you to deal with. Why are you standing in that position to be a right back? That's pointless, right? That's the way this mentality is. Okay, so then go get somebody. Who's the closest one to you? Okay, it might be the opposition's left back. Does that make you a right winger? Kind of, but not really because of the role you're playing in your team. But in that moment, yes. So then you're cover, and then you're shifting and all that. Your midfield especially, it's like the 6, the 8, the 10, or the 6 and 2 8s, or 2 6s and an 8, 2 6s and a 10. It's more about the triangle. What's your base? Are you going to have 1 behind 2 or 2 behind 1? And then you need guys who can adjust and play all the roles. And if Almendra is a guy who can play defensively, can play as an 8, can step into the attack, good. That's exactly what you need for this kind of system. And when you look at who's here, Moreno can be an 8 or a 10. He can defend too. He's just not a true 6. Heinemann has played an 8 as a 10, and he's played some of the 6. Hosetu has played some of the 6. He's played the 8. He's played the 10. Mo Adams, 6'8". Remedi, 6'8". And he can get forward and create for you a little bit. That's good. And you're going to need, because that's a lot of work in this system. A lot of work. But don't get rigid on even that level where they're a central midfielder, but he's a 6, he's an 8, he's a 10. In this system, it's going to change a lot, and you need your defensive midfielders to be able to step into the attack when they're in that position. You need your attacking midfielders to be able to drop and defend deep when they're in that position. When the game takes them there, they have to be able to adapt. It's vital for them to do that. Right backs need to be able to play the right wing. Left backs need to be able to play the left wing. They even need to be able to slide inside and be a functioning center back at times. Your center backs need to be able to step up and be holding midfielders at times. Your forwards need to be able to drop and be 10s. Your wingers need to be able to come inside and be second forwards. Sometimes an 8 too. Your 10s need to be 6s. Your 8s need to be 10s. That's the shifting. That's the shifting here. And that's what you need to look at, because look at Leeds as an idea of what this could look like. How often, to be on the extreme end, how often, John, have you seen Patrick Bamford drop deep to follow somebody defensively, where he's making a play at the top of his defensive 18?
You have.
Far more than you would expect for a number 9.
Exactly.
How many times have you seen Calvin Phillips, maybe even out wide, but more often at the edge of the attacking 18?
Yep.
How often have you seen Ayling all the way up in the attacking box and not on a set piece? Like the game took him there.
Yeah, the opportunity's there. You go in and you pursue what's open for you.
That's what you're looking for here. It is constant rotation. It's constant switching. It's constant evolution of the way the team looks. Whatever the formation is, it'll look like that at the kickoff. It'll look like that at any other kickoff in the match. And that might be about it. Because even when on a goal kick, it's not going to necessarily look like that, because your 6 needs to be able to drop between your center backs. Your outside backs need to push up very high. And then it turns into 3 in the back, but your 6 is a defender then, and one of your 3, and you're not playing a 3-4-3 at that point, but you're building up in that shape, and it's constant evolution. It's going to be a different way of seeing the game. And if this is the higher, and when it is, we'll go deeper into this stuff, and we'll try to set the table as best as we can. It's different. it's different. It's going to be really entertaining. It's going to be really hectic. There will also be breakdowns where there will be bad goals given up, where it falls apart. But your system is built to put the other team under intense pressure. That's how you control the game. But you also want to be able to play. It is not press, and when you get it, go as fast as possible to the goal. When it's open, yes. But you also have to build up play. And you have to be able to play against a team that sits deeper. And you have to be able to control the play with the ball. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Antino's in this morning, and he says, as we continue to wait for Eagles to announce if it's who is rumored, where do you think the, quote, playmaker, end quote, comes from in the system? I know formations and positions don't matter, but I wonder who could likely be that filter most often.
All of them. I mean, most often... Most often I'm leaning to players out wide, which I know is not your traditional playmaker, but that's a lot of times how the ball gets rotated because you're looking to create 1v1s out wide and be dangerous there. You will see assists spread around, though. You know, I think Marcelino Moreno can create. If you added a player like Almendra, he can create. Josetu, Hindman, Remedi, all can create through the middle. I think Joseph would have more assists than we've generally seen from him, too, because of the rotations and what we've seen from him turning into a true complete number 9. But I'm looking at guys like Dom, Barco, Lennon, and Bello. I think those are the guys who will be creating a lot. It's kind of in between. You know, we've talked about it before with Jurgen Klopp and his evolution. Klopp said at Dortmund, the press was the playmaker. They didn't have a true playmaker, but their pressing style is what created opportunities. Now, at Liverpool, the step has been, who are their biggest playmakers? They're outside backs. So that's something to look at here. Klopp and Bielsa have similarities. They come from different places. They come from different approaches, but they have similarities, and I think that's one. You know, when you look at Heinze coming in, and you've got outside backs like Bello and Lennon, they could be your ones that have a lot of assists. So it could get really interesting. We'll see. I mean, again, you know, you've got a match tomorrow. Once Concacaf is done, I think you'll start to get things moving into what's going to happen, what's next, what are the next moves, et cetera, et cetera.
A couple of other folks have some thoughts in this morning. Chris Kilroy with a CONCACAF Champions League question. Will any goals scored by Club America count as away goals for the purpose of aggregate?
I believe so. I mean, this is the home leg for Atlanta. I'm going to make sure they didn't change that, but I don't think they really could. Let's see. I believe it would. As we check through and make sure we're giving the proper information. Away goals rules applied if the aggregate's tied after the second leg. Second legs are considered as home matches of the original host team. So, yes, it would still apply. If it's level through all of that, including the away goals rule, then it goes to shootout. There's no extra time. So if, for example, Atlanta wins 3-0 in the match, they go to extra time straight away because it's tied. I think that's the only way it would go to penalties straight away. Sorry, no extra time. It'd go to penalties. So if Club America scores 1, Atlanta would have to score 5 to win 5-4, because if it's 4-4, Club America would have the away goals tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So that's the way it will go. If Club America scores 1, Atlanta has to score 5, and then you keep going up from there.
Fox Sports has just put this out. The quarterfinal between Tigres and NYCFC now moves to FS1 with John and Stu on the call.
That's the late game tonight, right?
Yeah.
NYC's got some issues. They've got some positive tests. Sean Johnson not playing. They haven't really played any other goalkeepers outside of Sean Johnson for a long time. So this is going to be an issue. And they're playing a good team in Tigres. It's a tough one. I think everybody's in a tough spot with the exception maybe of LAFC, who has a lot to prove here. And we'll see where they are. Atlanta's got a huge deficit. Montreal is playing a team in Olympia who has not lost since the restart. And you got to go all the way back to February 2nd. Olympia might be one of the best teams in Central America right now. And they can make things difficult for Montreal. And they got a lead.
Yep.
That's going to be a tough one for the Impact. The last time Olympia lost was it was not quite as far back as I thought. They lost to Motagua on March 10th. That's it. And they've been playing domestic league. They've been playing the Concacaf League to try to qualify for next year's Concacaf Champions League. 9-match winning streak. Unbeaten in 16. Not losing since the restart in September for them. And they've been playing a lot. So they're the only ones in the tournament that's left who have been playing consistently. They played locally before that. Montreal, it's like 22 days or so. Atlanta, it's more than that. It's really hard. It's really difficult. Club America hasn't played in a while, almost 3 weeks. So we'll see. They had to get the competition finished. There's just no way around it. Like I know there's some people who are like, well, why would they even do this? Like they got to finish it because they can't afford to give money back. Flat out, CONCACAF can't afford to rebate broadcasters, rebate sponsors. They need to finish this tournament for those reasons, and that's what they're doing. And it's difficult. It's very unpredictable because of that. These games could have a really weird flow to them. They always do in CONCACAF. They could be even weirder with this. What are the numbers on those CONCACAF games early for today anyway?
Olympia is a plus 110. The Impact are a plus 227. Your draw is a plus 240. Tigres is a minus 128. NYCFC is a plus 334, and your draw is a plus 257.
Yeah, I think it's Olympia and Tigres who get it done here. Olympia with a 2-1 lead coming in. Tigres with a 1-0 lead coming in.
Yeah, I just think that with all the issues with NYCFC, Sean Johnson not in net, all those questions for NYCFC lend it and lean for me for Tigres and Olympia just as a hot hand right now, so I've got to go with both of them.
So just a couple extra things on Agustino Mendra real quick. He reportedly, and this is reportedly, there's different bits of chatter about it, that he's got a $40 million release clause. Now, they can sell him for less than that, just like the Christian Pavone conversation. It was a $20 million number, but you can negotiate it, and it sounded like Boca would take 10. Nobody's paying $40 million right now, especially for a player who hasn't been training for a while. I don't know what the magic number would be to get it done, but it's one that's interesting because he's a really talented young player, but the fact that he's been basically holding out, it's a little confusing. We'll try to get a little more information on that element of it to see some of the things that led to it, to see what's going on. But it looks like he is returning to training for the first time in months. He's got to go through basically like your preseason medical testing, and I don't know what kind of COVID, integration there is to join the team. So he's got to go through that stuff, and then he could play for them domestically, or this is just the first step in getting him out of there. So we'll keep you posted as on what we can find out. He was really close to going to Miami before, and we will see if it gets done here.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that $40 million release clause, I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen in today's environment, first and foremost.
No, well, that was done before. And a lot of times you put that on a young, talented, up-and-coming player in general to scare people away.
Yeah.
So you have control over it. It's, yes, there's a $40 million, and if you come in and pay 40, we're not going to be happy to lose the player, but we'll be happy to take your $40 million. But if you want to talk about something less, we'd like to have the conversation with you. So yes. The 40 is just to skip the conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I know that this is just a random question, but where do you think the conversation would start if 40 is to skip the conversation?
No clue. And that's what's so hard about it because of this issue why he hasn't been playing. And I want to read up a little bit more. I want to find out what's been going on before, you kind of figure out what's going on with that, what the conversation is around it. I don't know if he was told he wasn't going to play and he got mad and walked away. I don't know if he's holding out to try to force a move. I don't know if Boca just said they're not going to play him. I don't know. I don't know where that stands. 20 years old. He turns 21 in February. Transfermarkt has him valued at $12.1 million, and their last update was in April before this holdout. I mean, really before a lot of the effects of COVID. There was a report, again, about Miami earlier. This was back in January. Te'ise had it. At that time, the reporting was that he would cost between $10 to $15 million. And it was talked about a good bit. They said at that time there was a $30 million release clause. Earlier reports before Miami came into the mix was that Boca wanted between 15 and 20 for Almendra. And again, this is pre-COVID. Let's see, anything else? No, that's what's there from January. So in the career stats for him, again, he's 20. He's young. 24 matches in league play for Boca, 6 matches in the Libertadores, 3 in cup play for Boca. And he's played 6 and an 8. Looks like a little bit more, according to Transfermarkt anyway, as an 8, not as much as a 6. Boca's had really good players at the 6, so that might be why he's pushed up a little bit more as a young player, going to kind of fit in a little bit more than demand the shape change for you. So if he might be more naturally a 6, okay, I could see that. Again, in the hindsight kind of system, and in a lot of systems like that, if it's not him, if it's somebody else, you want somebody who can do both. You want somebody who can play all the roles of that central midfield. So that's where things stand. His valuation got as high in 2019 as $16.5 million, according to Transfermarkt, and then came down a bit. So that's where it stands. We'll do a little digging and find out what we can about why he hasn't been part of the squad since the restart and see what we can figure out.
Both Tafka and Caleb Cook think that if Atlanta United can nab Almendra, it's a huge deal, using the huge word in all caps.
Why are people now saying that it wasn't a huge deal to nab Ezequiel Barco? Because it's the same kind of thing. Honestly, Barco was more of a factor for Independiente in a run to win a continental trophy than Almendra has been at Boca. I think Almendra is a great talent, but he's young. He is a player who is still developing. He's a player who's still finding his footing. Nothing's guaranteed. So be realistic. It's a very interesting signing. When Miami didn't get him, the season starts, then you get COVID, and he kind of drops off the radar. And then now it's like, well, what's been going on? Is it just the coaching changes that has pushed him out? Is there something else going on? Like, what's happening here? Is he antsy to go? Like, I don't know. So it could be a big one. He is an Argentine youth international. He would be part of that Argentine Olympic squad more than likely. That's always good to have. But he's still a young developing player. So keep that in mind. This is where it gets a little confusing because some people have said that, like, well, Almendra was playing behind Reynoso, and Reynoso's done really well in Minnesota. And then others are like, well, he's a 6. So, I mean, again, central midfield, you kind of need to do all of it. But young talent, not a sure thing, but a very good talent. So this is exciting, and we see what happens. And if he's a player that Heinze obviously would know and has seen and likes and wants to bring, that tells you a few things. Now, let's see what happens, and let's find out what's been going on lately. But, yes, Almendra, talent. I mean, a lot of people thought he'd be in Europe by now.
And I know that is today officially the beginning of festive fixtures, or do we wait to the weekend?
I think you have to wait till the weekend, right? No, I thought you waited till Boxing Day, to be honest.
Because, the way that it's being promoted by the Peacock and NBCSN with all of their games between now and basically January 4th, the line for Manchester City and West Brom has moved a little bit as the late game today, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
West Brom is down to a plus 2168 to win against Manchester City.
Yeah, I'm not touching it.
No.
I have no bad Christmas candy to throw near that thing.
Manchester City's a minus 833 for the late game. Chelsea in the midweek is a minus 145 at the Molineux going up against Wolves. Wolves is a plus 445.
Favorites should take care of both of these, right?
In theory, yeah.
I can't imagine they won't. All right, we got a bunch of questions on the Twitch pitch, so let's get to that. If you have questions out there listening live, you can tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. You can email us, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You can also join us on the Twitch pitch, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere. Mizano asks, considering the positioning under Heinze, how difficult do you think it will be for the players to get the new system? Is it going to take more than just preseason, midseason? Does it require the players to buy in just like they did into FDB's system? If you don't buy in, you're not playing.
Right.
Like flat out. This is a much more demanding way of playing. You better buy in or you can't play it. And it's not about positioning. Positioning's not the issue. It's about the philosophy. It's about the way to play. Positioning is not necessarily tactics. You know, like there is a system of how you structure your team, but the philosophy is what they're going to have to get and what they're going to have to buy into and what they're going to have to live. You can't do this halfway. This is not a style of play that you can do at half speed. You'll leave gaps and they will get exploited. You have to be all in. So it's not going to happen straight away. And it can't. And that's really for any kind of system. I think this one is maybe one that does take a little bit longer. You know, you look for progression. Look at Leeds. Leeds, early on, very exciting. Players were very up for it. And at the very beginning, first year of Bielsa, they had some shocking results, and people are like, wow, this is not what we expected from Leeds. Then they hit a rut where you had some fatigue set in, you have some injuries, you have guys stepping in who maybe aren't as good at the system. You have to make some changes to the roster as well to fit that as you learn. That takes time. Year one was a really good year for Leeds. They also were a team that was gunning to get promoted whether Marcelo Bielsa was there or not. They had the kind of talent to get promoted, whatever system they were going to play. So they did year one, about what they should have. You know, when you look at that talent, you look at that roster, not a failure, not a success, a good year, a solid year, which you would expect. Year two, they surpassed that. They got better. They were more understanding of all of the intricacies of the philosophy and the rotations and all that. They got more players in that fit exactly what they wanted to do. And they ran roughshod over the championship. In the Premier League, it's been a challenge because you don't have as talented of a roster, and talent even in the system still matters. It's not like the Red Bulls where you're trying to make up gaps in talent due to system. You still have to have talent in the system to get the best out of it. And there's times where they don't have as much talent as the opposition. There's times where they can't sustain the level that they're playing at. There's times where they have fluctuations in the game. I think the schedule really hurts Leeds right now. I think the structure of this season really hurts Leeds because of all the games coming fast and furious. Yeah. It just wears them down. They'll stay up. I think they're fine. I think they can push still up towards that 10 spot and be a team in the mid-table and grow from there. But it doesn't happen straight away. It could go one of two ways. It could be where they start out hot, excited, it's different, and it catches teams by surprise, and they blow some teams out of the water and then come back down to earth. Or it could be they're not getting some of the rotations yet. It's still not quite there, and it might be a slower start that builds. But I think the first half of the season, no matter which way it goes, if it's fast then slow or if it's slow then fast, the first half of the season needs to be a time where patience is given. It needs to be a time where there is an understanding that this is a new way of thinking. Yeah. This is a new way of breathing the game. And that takes a minute. It does. I think you've got the raw materials with players here that can fit and can do this. And that's exciting. But there's always going to be a player who catches us by surprise who doesn't get it. There's always going to be a player who catches us by surprise who gets it better than we would have expected. That happens. But you got to give half the season. I mean, I think it is a 2-year project. I think it is year one, you want to be your best at the end, as best as you can. You don't want to wear people out, and that's always a concern with this style of play. You want to be your best to be an MLS Cup contender, a dangerous team in the postseason. Year two, you want to be like Leeds in the championship in year two, like Tata Martino here in year two, where you are competing to win the league, win everything. You're that good. That's your progression. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. But, and I think we'll try to work on being consistent with terminology, because I think a lot of times in this country, we've thought about tactics as formation, and they are here. They're not. Tactics, you can play the same tactics in a 3-5-2, a 3-4-3, a 4-3-3, a 4-2-4. I mean, you can go all through whatever formation you want. You can play the same way. The philosophy, the way you play, the DNA of how you play, that's what's important, number one. And you have it. You have a way that you want to play. I think Gabriel Heinze can help reinforce and maybe add elements to it. He can kind of help structure it a little more deeply. But you kind of have been heading in that direction. And yes, the Frank de Boer part was part of that. I know it's the easy thing to say is, he's slow. It's not the same thing as Tata. It's completely different. No, it's not. There's a lot of foundational things that are the same. He never got them consistently playing the way they needed to capitalize on it. But it wasn't a dramatic departure. That's why you were what you were in 2019, third in the league. You were second in the league the year before. It wasn't that crazy. This year, whole different thing. That's maybe one reason why it's not still continuing in that road. So now you're not starting from scratch. You're not taking a bunker and counter team and turning them into this. So that helps. You're not taking your academy teams that played bunker and counter and tried to win tournaments to trying to actually play in this manner. The DNA is there. You're reinforcing it. You're getting a little bit deeper. You're adding a few more elements. Cool. And by the end of year two, you want to be very, very solid, both with your team competing to win every trophy they play for, your academy developing players that fit into your first team, and you trusting those players coming through that they can be as good as anybody you'll go find outside. That's kind of the steps that you're looking for here over a 2-year period.
And I think for me, and you mentioned Leeds and schedule compression, I think that something that I'm probably just going to pull to the side in the upcoming season, if the coach is who a lot of the talk is going to be, when you get into a schedule compression element of your season, getting through those moments where you have those stretches of midweek weekend, midweek weekend, midweek weekend, for whatever reason. And I think that for the larger picture of the season on the whole, it's how you manage those parts of your schedule. For me, that's what I guess one of the subsets that I'm going to look at this year, if it is anticipated who it's going to be when it comes to the manager and the system and all those kinds of things. How you manage those bumps in your schedule for the larger picture and getting where you want by the end of the year.
Yeah, it's it's a crazy. Tesco now says, please explain how a 3-3-3-1 works on the field. Well, you know what? Let's wait till something happens. He doesn't predominantly play 3-3-3-1, first off. I think that needs to be understood. His team is predominantly going to be based out of a 4-3-3 as a base. It will look very easily like that, and I'll tell you how that goes real quick if I can work this through in my head. So, to get to the 3 out of the 4 in the back, your outside backs push, your 6 drops. So that your 3 in the back. One of your central midfielders has to drop and play centrally. Your outside backs become part of the next line of 3. Your next line of 3 is your other central midfielder plus your wingers that can tuck in or stay wide, and then your forward. So that's how it shifts from a 4-3-3 to a 3-3-3-1. And again, it doesn't really matter because how often are you going to see those lines in that way on a regular basis? You're probably not. But that's an easy shift. You know, we've seen that. Honestly, we've seen that a lot. Jeff Larinowitz dropping into the back line, your outside backs pushing up high, your wingers, tucking in a little bit or coming back a bit in like a 4-2-3-1, as people would call a 4-3-3, and your forward by themselves up top. It happens. It also happens where the wingers stay up very, very high and your number 10 is in a 3-3-1-3. That happens too. But again, it's shapes, and the game's not about shapes. The game moves. The game moves a lot. Jason Nix with a point here, and he says, what happens to Leeds when Bielsa leaves? Not saying it's anytime soon. It might be. Can they pivot to another system with these players? I'll tell you why it might be soon is he's managed more games at Leeds than any other club he's been at in his life.
Yep.
And he's been doing this for a long time. He doesn't stick around. It's, they got to the Premier League. I think there was no question he was going to take that opportunity. Does he stay again? Maybe not. It's going to depend on if he feels like there's more to develop there and more he can do. But this is what Bielsa does. He has been instrumental in them overhauling their facilities. He is, I'm assuming, I haven't read too much about it yet, but I'm assuming he's been instrumental in overhauling the way they develop players. He's given them a template. He doesn't just come in, keep everything secret. I've got my secret book. I've got my secret laptop over here with the way I see the game. I do not share anything with anybody. Well, he's an open book. Mm-hmm. So he's giving you a template, and you can continue to play in a way that is similar. Somebody else is going to interpret it differently. If you want to follow up with a Jorge Sampaoli, who is a Bielsa guy, but is more defensive. Okay, it's a tweak. You could follow it up with somebody of the Guardiola kind of school because he was heavily influenced by Bielsa, but he's more possession-based. So there's a lot of tweaks. What you can't follow it up with is a Big Sam, is a defend and counter style, because then you've got to change everything over. But you're not. I think the difference, and maybe this gets tweaked a little bit, you're not signing a bunch of players who don't fit other systems. You're signing players that fit your system the best, but I would take Luke Ayling anywhere in the world. And he's a player who, correct me if I'm wrong, he was a second division player, wasn't really thought of in any significant way. I'd take him to any team in the world. Amazing player. And Bielsa's gotten the best out of him. Dallas, another great player who is all over the field.
Calvin Phillips,
who was developing, but everybody said he had to go somewhere else to hit that next level. Phillips was more of a sure thing. Like Ayling's a revelation to me. Love watching him play. So you're not creating something that can't be replicated, but somebody's going to come in and do it a little differently. Maybe they're not as risky. Maybe they're more aggressive. That's kind of hard to be, but maybe you find a way to do it. Maybe they're a little more towards the possession element. Maybe they're a little more toward the counter element of it. A little more conservative. They look to counter as much as they look to play on the front foot. You can tweak it and you can adjust it very easily.
Ayling was at Yeovil and Bristol City, 242 appearances before Leeds United.
I mean, Yeovil. And look at him now. Like, I would take him anywhere. Amazing player. A lot of talk about systems and such. A lot of talk about the Atlanta fan base doesn't have patience. Nizano, we got to find some. We will do our best to develop it if we can. Abby shares it. Give a scarf, get a scarf on Boxing Day, December 26th. Atlanta United has done this since 2015. I don't think they did anything in 2014. They might have, actually. I think 14 they did. 2015, I know they did. 2014, I think it was definitely more on the give, but I want to say they had the red and yellow original Atlanta scarves that they were giving out before they changed the yellow to gold. But I know they did it in 15. They had special scarves. It's a limited edition scarf. You donate a scarf. I'm not sure who the donations are going to this year. They've worked with so many great local nonprofits to get those scarves out to people. I think they've worked with Atlanta Mission in the past, groups like that. So it's December 26th, Boxing Day at Hampton and Hudson in Inman Park, 299 North Highland Ave. Great place, great food there too. It's from 9 to noon on Boxing Day if you want to get one of the limited edition Boxing Day scarves. And if you show up at 9 o'clock, they're probably going to be gone. So you want to get there early and get your limited edition scarf. Very cool thing.
Yeah, news from Doug Robertson over at the AJC. Mo Adams, Anton Walks did not travel. Marcelino Moreno, Jurgen Damm nursing small injuries, unlikely to start.
Okay, so Dom Moreno, not 90 minutes, and Walks and Adams didn't travel, and no explanation why? They just didn't travel?
No explanation why. Okay. Just very quick greatest hits from Doug.
Yeah, I mean, look, this time of year, you don't know, or this time of our lives, we don't know why they didn't travel. I know some people are going to make assumptions, and they might not be wrong. It's just that's not reported until the player says so. Like Sean Johnson came out and said he tested positive. We don't know if that's the case. It could be injured. Mo Adams was coming back from an injury at the end of the season anyway. He might not be ready to go. I think Walks was banged up at the end of the year too. So we don't know. But they're not there. I don't think that changes anything too dramatically. Moreno and Dom not being able to maybe start hurts you a good bit because you don't have Brooks Lennon either. I really think this means that Jack Gurr plays. And it's a huge opportunity for him. How do you solve the central midfield? You've got pieces. I mean, you've got Remedi, you've got Hindman, you've got Josetu. If you start a combination of that, you could get creative and play Barco as a 10 in front of two people if you wanted to play Hindman and Remedi together and then play another option on the wing like Mulraney. I mean, it could be Gurr and Mulraney on the right side, potentially. So you've got options, but yeah, that's not exactly what you wanted to hear.
And a couple of other notes that are carryovers from last night and the soccer over there extravaganza. Nathan Pugh was in this morning. He says he found a source saying Tuchel's such a bad guy because he tried to play Creed in the locker room at Dortmund. He out-ironicked the hipsters.
I don't trust Nathan's sources.
And Brock of Gibraltar says that last night's episode may have even dethroned South America jersey shopping down here.
I don't know if that's true. That was pretty ridiculous. Both were pretty ridiculous.
Yes. Rich Ransom, as we were talking about leagues around the world, Rich Ransom says no promotion playoffs in the J League in 2021. The top two J2 teams will be promoted to the J League in Japan.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you're going to see this more often. It should have happened before. At least some leagues are being intelligent about this with the craziness of these seasons. Anything else on the Twitters?
Nope. There's conversation among folks about Agustin Almendra and things like that, but that's among the folks, and we like to see the conversation among folks.
Conversations are good. Any other news that has popped up while we have been live that we have not touched on? Let's see what we got here. Interesting one out of Argentina. Cesar Luis Merlo is reporting that Tomas Pochettino, and I do not believe he's not Mauricio's son, but I don't know if they're related or not. He's been really good in the Argentine league at Talleres. Looks like he could be going to River. I wondered if he would start to get more attention, and if he didn't, I was really hoping MLS teams would start to look at him a little bit more. He's 24. Really good player. Really, really good player. He has been really solid. Let's check the news front before we go. You've got the expansion draft tonight at 6. Don't forget about that. Reports out of Brazil that Seattle has decided to complete João Paulo's transfer and added 2 years to his contract, so they're going to lock him up long term. That makes total sense. He was very, very good. The Mexican Federation and the Spanish Federation have signed an agreement to work closely together over the next 3 years. This was released. Tom Marshall has a little bit of the detail. Mexico World Cup on Twitter. Planning, development of women's football, potential games between their national teams at different levels, shared training for coaches, conditioning coaches, referees. It's good. I'd like to see the U.S. Federation sign an agreement on referee development. That would be huge. It needs to happen. It really, really needs to happen. Jason Nix with a non sequitur.
Okay.
Have we discussed the $1 million it was reported that NYC pays per match for Yankee Stadium?
No.
That's not crazy. I want to say D.C. was reportedly paying that at RFK. Yankee Stadium, I'm not surprised because they've got to have field turnover as well to get that, so that's another big cost. They don't have another alternative. And they knew that coming in. I mean, it's not like it became a surprising number.
Yeah.
That was the only way they could function, was to pay that and play at Yankee Stadium. That's why they need to build their own place. That's why they'll never make money until that. When you look at the numbers from Forbes, you keep that in mind. Like, they're losing money every game day because of that, I would assume. And the Forbes valuations, the Forbes, educated guesses on turnover, NYC is one of the teams that loses the most money every year, but it's not an obscene amount. It's between 15, 20 million. It's 8 figures. But a lot of that is this rental. So you get into your own venue, they're probably making money. And that's really important. Abby with the weather update for tomorrow. Afternoon thunder showers, no surprise. High of 79 during the day. Rain chance into the evening, 60%. That would be intriguing if we get a crazy, sloppy, wet, rainy night
turn it into a
Orlando,
mucker, yeah.
and it gets crazy. Who knows? And Nick's asked if Yankee Stadium keeps concessions or NYC. I don't know. That's a good question. Probably NYC doesn't get all of it at a minimum. They might get some of it. They probably get some of the parking. Yankee Stadium probably gets some of the ticket. There's probably a service charge, stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of the leagues in Europe have midweek action today.
Okay, hold on.
Holding.
This is not a shock, but Atlanta United signs 4 players to short-term agreements, and this is so they can participate in the match tomorrow. You could train before, but Eric Lopez, Philip Goodrum, Jack Gurr, Ben Lundgaard have signed short-term agreements. That allows them to play in Concacaf. That allows them to be on the game day and play. We've talked about it with Gurr, no surprise. Lundgaard will potentially be your number 2 goalkeeper on the game day roster tomorrow. Goodrum could factor in as one of those options out wide, especially with Jurgen Damm not 100%. Eric Lopez could start. Eric Lopez could start up top. Eric Lopez could start on the left. If you wanted to do that thing I talked about with moving Barco in as a 10, Lopez could play off on the flank on either side. So signing them to short-term agreements means they can actually play in the match. Yeah. That's the only change. Don't read into it anything else. It's literally so they're eligible to play in the match, which we expected for all of those. With the Lundgaard, maybe you don't expect to play, but you expect to be on the roster in case of anything.
Right. Let's see. Germany has action today. England has action through all of the major divisions. Starts at 12:30. Bundesliga has 3 games at 2:30, including Hertha Berlin and Dortmund and Stuttgart playing FC Union Berlin. Those are all at 2:30. A lot of FA Cup in the lower divisions for England today. That starts at 2:45. Let's see. We talked about what's going on with the Premier League. There's the one late game in La Liga at 4 o'clock, Real Madrid, Athletic Bilbao. Madrid is a minus 189. Bilbao is a plus 550. And then when the sun goes down, Copa Libertadores, Copa Sudamericana, in addition to Champions League.
Yeah, tonight, lots of viewing options. 7:30, Palmeiras hosting Libertad. See if Tito Villalba gets on the field for that one. It was a 1-1 in leg one in Paraguay. That is not what Libertad needed. Now they got to go to Brazil, and they got to win. Palmeiras is a big favorite. Libertad is plus 750, I'm seeing. That is, yeah.
I've got them as close to, in the composite, as close to plus 800.
Yeah, I do not see that happening at all. Sudamericana, man, why do they have this separated here on SofaScore? It's really goofy. What's the Sudamericana schedule today?
Sudamericana schedule is just the one match at 7:30, Católica and Vélez Sarsfield. Católica is a plus 170 in the composite. Vélez Sarsfield plus
Universidad Católica. It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, otherwise, you're just saying Catholic.
Okay, so Universidad Católica is a plus 170, Vélez Sarsfield a plus 150, your draws a plus 245.
What was the first leg?
First leg, you have me click on it now.
It's kind of important. I got it. First leg was 2-1 to Universidad Católica.
First leg was 2-1 Universidad Católica back on December 8th.
Just said that. Very good. It was a late goal from Vélez to pull the 1. And that match was at Vélez. So Universidad Católica has 2 away goals in their pocket. They are at home in this one. Looks like a toss-up on the night, pretty much.
Yeah.
But Universidad Católica should go through. And that's a manager whose name has come up quite a bit, and Ariel Holland, potentially for the Chile job. He'd been linked at one point to Atlanta. He won Sudamericana with Barco at Independiente. His name could come up and get kind of interesting here. So this would be a big win for them. Vélez has some work to do. And then Champions League tonight, 8 o'clock for Concacaf is when it gets started. That is Montreal and Olympia. 10:30 is what's listed here for Tigres and New York City. And that one will be on FS1. The first game's on FS2. Both are on 2-day NA.
Yep, and I will probably be flipping back and forth among all 3 of those channels just to kind of get a lay of the land.
I don't think I'm going to dig too deep into the Vélez game just because they've got the biggest hill to climb. So I'll have Palmeiras and Libertad on a small screen, and the big screen will be CONCACAF. And we'll be tweeting about it. So follow John so his Twitter will work. He still can't figure out how to unfollow numpties. I don't get this. This isn't complicated.
See, my problem is, and I've started going through the process of unfollowing numpties. But my problem is, since there's like 3 different versions of me, I need to have like 3 separate Twitter accounts so I can follow 15,000 people.
Don't be that guy. That's lame.
So it's like all of the work that I have to do with football and college football, and here I'm limited to like 1,700 people per person to try to 1,600.
You don't seem to understand how this works, John. I follow 10,500 people. 10,501.
See, I need to get that.
Well, I'm not the only reason I have that is because I have 11,720 followers. Right. I follow people back for the most part. So I follow some people that the way my Twitter goes, and if you are in a category you don't want to be in and you're on my Twitter and you want me to follow you back, then give me a heads up, shoot me a message. Because if somebody's not active, like they have a Twitter account, I'm sure they use it. I'm sure they use it for headlines. They use it to follow the news, but they don't tweet. I don't necessarily follow those people back. And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just you're not tweeting. So, I mean, why am I following? I follow some people that don't follow me back. That's fine.
I do that too.
And other people that are listeners, that are fans, that follow me, if you're an active tweeter, I follow you back. So that's how I have followers and followings.
Yeah, I have.
Do you understand now?
I have just over 2,550 followers right now.
You have what now?
2,567 for followers.
And you're following a whole bunch of people.
5,000.
Okay.
My max.
Well, then maybe what you need to do is not follow so many people that don't follow you back, because then that helps your algorithm here. You can create a list of people you don't follow, but if you want to go check what they're having to say, you can do that. Do you understand what a Twitter list is?
No.
Oh, geez.
I see lists in the margin, so.
This is like Twitter 101. Go to lists in the margin.
Yeah, I clicked on it. It says, you haven't created any lists yet. Create a list.
Create a list. You can create a high school football list. And if you don't need to follow, like people who don't follow you back, you can unfollow.
Okay.
And you can add them to the list.
Ah, okay.
So I created lists, and if anybody out there wants to follow them, because you can follow people's lists, I did this so I kind of kept things a little more structured. It's really been helpful to keep up with what's going on in different parts of the world. I have a Concacaf list, a Concacaf football list that is Mexico. It's not my MLS and U.S. men's national team, folks. That's a separate list. But the CONCACAF list is Mexico, it's Costa Rica, it's Honduras, it's El Salvador, it's the Caribbean. It's everybody who is talking a lot, breaking news, and analysis on CONCACAF.
Okay.
I have a European soccer list, and I have a South American list. So that's helped me differentiate. So if I want to see what's going on in South America, I'll check my list. I'll scroll through the most recent stuff. Okay, cool. Got it. I've got an MLS one that I'm still building out. I haven't made that one public yet. MLS and USMNT. So I got to structure that. That's what you can do. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Alex Pacine, I follow you back. I believe. Now I need to double check. I don't want to be lying to you. Because I think I've interacted with you on Twitter many, many times. Yes, we follow each other. Of course. There is love here. You're not even muted, Alex. It's all good, right? Maybe a few people that get muted from time to time. That's okay. It happens. People get on their things, and it's all good. I'm on Twitter for soccer and sometimes music and sometimes Atlanta stuff and sometimes throwbacks. I'm pretty simple on the Twitters. But the list can be a valuable tool for you, John. That is your Twitter 101 update for the day.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, the Twitter list thing probably will help.
There you go. So you can move people from following and move them over to the list, and you can unfollow, but you're still keeping up with them.
Okay.
They know if it's a public list, then they know that they're on your list. They might follow you when they see that you added them to the list. Then you can follow them back. Then your numbers will be better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah, I might need to mute Pacine. Might get out of hand. We'll see. He won't know if I muted him. That's the fun part about it.
There you go.
All right. So do you have any questions about the Twitter lesson for the day, John?
No, just now I need to take the time and pull some time aside and create lists and take the ones that don't follow me and insert them into the list as opposed to having them as something that I follow.
See, this is where, and Mazzano, this is where I get confused. Mazzano says, I've tweeted, but all my names on Twitter and such are all different. That's where I get confused, where you guys come into the Twitch pitch and you have a name and it's different on Twitter. I don't always link everybody up. There's a few that I know the differences between, but not everybody. So if that you are in that situation, My messages are open. Send me a message and say, hey, I'm following you, and I'm on the Twitch pitch, and we talk all the time, and I will follow you back. I will fix it. I will fix that. I am not perfect. I try to use the social media as a megaphone, as a tool to educate, as a tool to learn for myself. It is very valuable, and it's how you use it. People say that the social media is bad. It's toxic. Only if you want it to be toxic.
Yeah.
It can be very, very good if you want it to be very, very good.
Yeah. No, I view it as one of my lead information resources when it comes to news and breaking news and where to go when I need to have things researched and going from there. No, I view it as part of the spoke in the wheel where I can sit there and it's like, oh, okay, this happened here, and it'll send me in a different direction to fill in information that I don't have.
Oh, wow, this is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And I wish I had a sounder for it to finish the show off. I don't because my sounder system is all messed up. It's not developing news. You know, it might deserve the full treatment. One of the most incredible superstitions I have ever seen. Corinthians in Brazil. Big club, famous club. Their fans are celebrating. A Brazilian Twitter user, Timão Dados, noticed that Corinthians have never lost their last game before the release date of a Taylor Swift album or the game immediately after the album is released.
Wow, that's deep.
They have, and BBC, of course, Corinthians fans have found a way to know when to fill in the blank space for a win. Who wrote that? Ben Sutherland. That's funny. Goes back nearly 15 years.
Wow.
Corinthians beat Cruzeiro and Palmeiras 1-0 both games on either side of the release of Taylor Swift's first album.
Wow.
Oh, wow. He keeps going. Perhaps Corinthians' fierce city rival Sao Paulo, with whom there is much bad blood, knew they were in trouble once Swift surprisingly released her second album of 2020, Evermore, last Friday. With the Swift rule in effect, Corinthians, who have been playing poorly lately, were able to shake it off and win 1-0. That's incredible.
Oh, that's great.
Corinthians fans are really excited because I guess there's rumors of a third album now from Taylor Swift this year. She's running out of time. They are posting pictures mocked up of Taylor Swift in Corinthians kits. They are hoping there is another one. Call it what you want. Correlation is not causation. But whenever the 22 are on the pitch and Swift has an album out, just look at what it makes Corinthians do.
That's tremendous.
Wow. That's crazy. Like, every time she has released an album, Corinthians won the match before the date and after the date. Every time in her career. So Corinthians fans are really hoping she continues to release albums. Good job, BBC. I'd never heard that one.
Well done.
And we'll end it on that. So some Brazilian fans are looking for a new Taylor Swift album before the year is out, so that maybe they can win some more games because they haven't been very good this year. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we'll recap the expansion draft, any trades that come after it, because I think there could be a few. I think there will be at least one pick that ends up getting flipped. We will do our digging and our research on Agustin Almendra and what his situation is at Boca now that the rumors are there. We'll get into a preview of CONCACAF Champions League. Mike Conti will be joining us tomorrow morning to talk about that. We'll have stoppage time tomorrow afternoon as well. Busy day tomorrow, but a busy day tonight too, with expansion draft at 6, trades afterwards, Libertadores and Sudamericana at 7:30, CONCACAF Champions League starting at 8 o'clock, 2 games. So we will be talking about it on the Twitters. Follow John so he can fix this stuff. OSG Nelson. Follow Soccer Down Here. Follow me at Longshoe. Thanks for hanging out. Y'all have a good rest of the day. Mucho platio.
Mucho platio.